Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, how to get 30, how to get 20, 20, 20, how to get 20, 20, how to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
The high price of housing has become a hot-button issue in this year's presidential election. Since 2019, home prices across the U.S. have risen by 54% on average. This is according to home value and mortgage data published by the service company Intercontinental Exchange. On top of that, property taxes and rental prices have both continued to climb, leaving many Americans struggling to make ends meet. Over the last year, the rises in home prices have begun to slow down, but both the rental and home ownership market remain inflated, leaving little supply for affordable housing. This has left millions of adults with not a lot of options, and for some, it's even led to homelessness.
Apartments are running at about 30% higher rents than they were just 2 years ago. And in some markets, it's even going up faster than that. And this is following what has been a long and sustained increase in housing prices relative to inflation overall. So people who have low incomes, where they would ordinarily spend most, if not all of their income on rent, basically get submerged when the rents exceed even their ability to contribute most of their income toward that housing.
That's Dennis Culhane, a professor of social policy at the University of Pennsylvania and an expert on homelessness and housing policy. Culhane says that this group in the rental market would ordinarily try to buy, but that's nearly impossible right now with the combination of high mortgage rates and inflated home prices.
So we got sort of this locked up situation in the housing market that's crowding up the rental market as well. So that's putting pressure that goes all the way down to the lowest parts of that rental market. And similarly, we have sort of the income inequality in some of the larger cities, especially on the West Coast, where the tech sector salaries have created a large group of renters who can pay $3,000 and $4,000 a month rents without any trouble. And so that's driving the behavior of the market, trying to serve that population and the people that are close to that kind of income level. And so there's just been a deterioration in the supply of housing that is affordable to the lowest income people, especially people who rely on a limited fixed income.
With a larger percent of each paycheck going toward housing, this leaves less money in the bank for other necessities and emergencies. As an added pressure, the prices of food, home goods, and other basics have all risen compared to pre-pandemic levels. In April of this year, the research and analytics company Gallup polled a random sample of 1,000 adults on the state of personal finances. One survey question asked, "What's the number one financial problem you're currently facing?" 41% of respondents said inflation and a high cost of living. The cost of owning or renting a home took second place. For some lower-income Americans on tight budgets, these high prices are making it almost impossible to survive. And if you zoom in on older Americans over the age of 50, many of whom are on a fixed income from retirement plans or Social Security, these financial struggles can quickly snowball out of control. As of last year, 1 in 4 people experiencing unsheltered homelessness was over the age of 55. That's nearly 140,000 Americans, according to the National Alliance to End Homelessness. If you zoom in on the state of California, this percentage is notably higher when looking at the state's homeless population.
This podcast brought to you by Ring. With Ring cameras, you can check on your pets to catch them in the act.
Izzy, drop that.
Or just keep them company.
Aw, I'll be home soon.
Make sure they're okay while you're away with Ring. Learn more at ring.com/pets.
Whoa. Landing an account this big will totally change my landscaping business. It's going to mean hiring more guys and more equipment and new trucks for the new guys to drive the new equipment in. I don't know if I'm ready.
You can do this, and Ford Pro FinSimple can help. Our experts are ready to make growing pains less painful for your business with flexible financing solutions that meet the needs of your business today when you need them. Get started at fordpro.com/financing.
In our California statewide study of people experiencing homelessness, almost half, or 48%, of all homeless single adults were age 50 and older.
That's Dr. Margot Kuchel, a professor of medicine at the University of California, San Francisco. She's also the division chief at the UCSF Center for Vulnerable Populations and is the director of the BNAF Homelessness and Housing Initiative.
We did research in the early 2000s that showed that in the early 1990s, 11% of people experiencing homelessness in San Francisco were 50 and older. And by 2003, 37% were. And now it looks like statewide, about 48% of those single homeless adults are 50 and older. My research done originally in Oakland showed that among those 50 and older and homeless, over 40% were homeless for the first time. They had never been homeless, not even for one night, before the age of 50. And in our California statewide study, we found the same thing, that among individuals who were homeless and were 50 and older, 41% had never been homeless, not even for a night, before the age of 50.
She explains that people within this population have typically dealt with this struggle throughout life.
These are generally people who've worked low-wage, physically demanding jobs their whole life and have not been paid well and have really struggled just to keep the roof over their head. And then sometime after the age of 50, something happens and everything falls apart. And that something happening is usually things like they lost their job got outsourced, or otherwise weren't able to keep doing it, or that happened to their spouse or partner. They got sick, or their spouse or partner got sick. Their marriage broke up, or their spouse or partner died, or their parent died. And that these disruptions were enough to push them into homelessness.
If we switch over to Culhane's focus of research, he's been following the rise of the homeless population on a national level since the 1980s.
We've been observing really for the last 25 years that the homeless population is getting older and older. Part of that is driven by the fact that we have the baby boom population that's coming into their senior years, but especially the second half, the younger half of the baby boom generation, people born between 1955 and 1965. They have, since 1980s, they have constituted the plurality of the adult homeless population.
Many in this particular group have an elevated risk of ending up in this situation because of challenges they dealt with in their 20s and 30s that limited long-term earning potential. Culhane points out that this population faced back-to-back recessions in the 1980s and high unemployment rates. As a result, many have lived on the streets for several years, while others have been teetering on the edge of homelessness for quite a while.
It has affected them as a generation as a whole. When you compare them, for example, to the older baby boomers who had much more wealth, who had much more housing assets, who started out with higher incomes, who had easier access to the labor market. So there's a real sort of divide between those two groups. But what's happening now is old age is creating limited work opportunities for people. They may be relying on fixed incomes. They may not, even if they're not eligible for Social Security in particular, they're too young for Social Security retirement, or they didn't have the years that they paid into it. They're stuck in what's called the Supplemental Security Income Program, SSI, which nationally is around $850 a month. And so there's a whole group of people who are not able to keep up with the housing costs because that SSI income is not increased with the housing inflation rate. It's increased with the consumer price index, which does not reflect the huge impact of housing burden for these people.
Kuchel says that this crisis has been growing for decades, and now because of added societal strains, it's accelerating at a faster pace. Without intervention, the situation will only deteriorate as millions of baby boomers grow older and are unable to work.
I think what's important to note is that as we have underfunded housing and housing costs have gone up completely disproportionate to incomes, what we're doing is we're creating this crisis of older adults who, once these older adults become homeless, they stay homeless for a really long time.
Join us next week in the first half of Viewpoints as we talk about what life looks like for these older Americans out on the streets and what's being done to reduce these numbers. To find out more about this topic, links to resources, and our guests, head over to viewpointsradio.org. For more behind the scenes and to support our show, follow us on Instagram, X, and Facebook by searching Viewpoints Radio. This segment was written and produced by our executive producer, Amira Zaveri. Our studio manager is Dason Dickey. I'm Gary Price. This segment is brought to you by Capital One. With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One N.A. Member FDIC.